I'm Jason Hager, and this is Marketing Notes for Entrepreneurs from Greyleaf Media, where impact-driven leaders use trust, clarity, and strategy to turn good work into sustainable growth. This is the 8th episode in our series on how a wrong ICP cascades through your entire marketing system. Last time, we talked about how a wrong ICP breaks your pricing. Today, how it breaks your retention. High retention is supposed to mean something. Customers stay when they're getting value. That's the logic most businesses run on. But retention measures how many people stay. What it doesn't measure is why they stayed. Those are different ways of thinking. Wrong ICP customers may stay, not because the fit is right, but because switching is hard. To them, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, even when the juice they have isn't that good. New vendors, technology, or platforms mean research, transition costs, internal change management, and new relationships. Staying is easier than leaving, even when the relationship was never quite right. So they stay. This means that your retention metric can look healthy while the underlying relationship isn't. Sure, renewals come in. Maybe churn is low, and on paper, everything is working. But are they referring your solution to others? Is their business expanding? Are they using the full product, showing up and responding? Or are they quiet, renewing out of inertia, only getting what they need and nothing more? The customers who stay without growing are telling you something. Healthy relationships compound. They deepen. They expand. When a customer remains static for years, that stability may not be trust. It may be inertia. Most businesses don't notice until they're gone. This is episode 16, How a Wrong ICP Breaks Your Retention. Let's talk about the retention that looks like success on the surface, but underneath is barely surviving. Let's start with the retention that isn't. Wrong ICP retention has a signature. The customers are there. They renew. They don't complain. Support tickets are low. The relationship looks stable. But stability isn't the same as health. The point I want you to notice is that these two things can look identical from the outside, and from most dashboards, for a long time. AOL is probably the clearest version of this at scale. At their peak in the early 2000s, tens of millions of subscribers. Broadband expanded and better alternatives emerged. The subscriber numbers held. Not because AOL was delivering exceptional value, but because canceling was notoriously difficult. And for many people, their entire digital identity was tied to that address. They retained millions of customers who had already mentally moved on. The revenue looked real. The relationship wasn't. By the time the numbers showed the damage, it had been compounding for years. The mechanism is the same in a service business. The client who's been with you 3 years and pays on time. They have no major complaints, but they also haven't referred anyone. They haven't asked about expanding either. Responding to check-ins with, "Everything's fine," and nothing more. That account is costing you something you can't see. your attention and effort that could have been spent on a different client. One who fits, who grows, who refers, who becomes part of how new clients find you. A symbiotic partner in business. Wrong ICP retention doesn't just hold the wrong person in place. It can also keep the right person out. Now let's talk about the silence before churn. Wrong ICP customers don't usually leave loudly. There's no incident, no complaint that escalates. There's no clear moment where the relationship broke. They just don't renew. Or they renew at a reduced scope. And when you look back at what happened, there's nothing obvious to point to. That's the signal. When a customer leaves and you can't identify a specific failure, the problem was almost always fit. The warning signs don't read as warnings. They read as stability. It looks like this: low friction, quiet renewals, no news. But notice what's not there. No case studies offered. No introductions made. No expansion conversations they started. The engagement is transactional, polite, present, but only to the edge of what they contracted for. These customers are managing around you, not building with you. So when something shifts on their end, a budget cut, a strategic pivot, or a competitor who comes in lower, the math around switching changes. So they leave and they do it cleanly without drama. The relationship was never strong enough to make leaving hard. Now I want to talk about what the metrics can't see. Retention rate doesn't distinguish between they stayed because we're excellent and they stayed because leaving was hard. It just sees that they stayed. NPS, or Net Promoter Score, doesn't catch it either. Wrong ICP customers aren't usually unhappy. They give you 7s and 8s. The product works adequately for what they need. They're not unhappy enough to complain. They're also not delighted enough to tell anyone. The point is that the damage shows up in numbers you're not tracking. Referrals that never came. Expansions that never happened. The pipeline that should be filling itself from a base of genuinely well-served customers, but isn't. You can't measure what never happened. This means that wrong ICP retention can run for years before the pattern becomes visible. It usually only surfaces when you start asking why growth feels harder than it should, considering how good your retention numbers are. Here's how to diagnose it. Retention rate alone isn't enough. The underlying question is this: who is staying, and what are they doing? 3 things worth mapping across your current customers. Which ones have referred someone? Not would refer us, but who actually has. The customers who refer without being asked are telling you they believe in what you do beyond what they use themselves. That's ICP fit showing up as behavior. Which ones have expanded? More scope? More services? More of anything? Expansion requires trust and perceived value that a transactional relationship doesn't generate. A flat account over multiple years is a signal worth paying attention to. And when you lose a customer, what's their story? A pattern of nothing went wrong churn is a retention problem that looks like an execution problem. it isn't. Track those separately. The goal isn't to rank your customers. It's to understand which ones genuinely fit and to let that understanding shape where you go next. Here's what to do about it. The answer isn't to start churning customers who don't fit. It's to stop acquiring them and pay attention to what that pattern reveals about who really fits. Serve the customers you have well. The Wrong-ICP customer didn't do anything wrong. They took an offer that was available to them. The problem was upstream, in acquisition and positioning. Don't make them pay for that. But look hard at the customers who refer, expand, and engage. They're the ones your business was built to serve. What do they have in common? How did they find you? What problem were they solving when they first reached out? The answers to those questions are worth more than any retention optimization tactic you could run. The retention that lasts isn't built by making it harder to leave. It's built by serving the right customers so well that leaving doesn't make sense. There's one question I want you to leave with. Look at your retained customers, but not your best clients. The quiet ones. The ones who renew without conversation, pay without friction, and haven't introduced you to anyone. How many of those relationships are being held in place because they're avoiding the cost of switching? Not by fit or by genuine satisfaction, but by the fact that leaving is more work than staying. That number is telling you something about your ICP. If today raised questions about who you're actually retaining and who your business was built to serve, the ICP Toolkit is a free 15-page download that walks you through who's actually buying from you and how to build your messaging around them. grayleafmedia.com/find-your-ICP. If the pattern we talked about today sounds familiar, if the customers you're working hardest to keep don't seem to be the ones your business is built for, brand therapy is where to start. It's a diagnostic process that helps you see the mismatch clearly before you try to fix it. grayleafmedia.com/diagnostic. If this episode resonated with you, I'd really appreciate it if you shared it with a founder who's been surprised by a customer leaving when everything seemed fine. A review wherever you listen also goes a long way toward helping this show reach the people it's built for. Next time, how a wrong ICP doesn't just break individual systems. It breaks all of them at once. Episode 17 is the connective episode, the cascade effect, and why fixing one thing in isolation doesn't work. Until then, look at who's referring your product or service and who is just coasting. That gap is often the whole story.